queers. What's on the big gay agenda today, Theora?
Today, we are unfortunately revisiting an old topic that is near and dear to our hearts and probably yours too, which is cancel your queers, the ongoing epidemic in queer media where queer characters, queer focused plotline shows are being canceled, mostly in America. Why are we still here?
Woo?
So, you want some background of no woo, this is not good, but it's okay.
That's why there was a question mark, Theora.
This isn't a bummer episode, we promise. There'll be some joy at the end. If you want a refresher, just go revisit our other episode. We did this in 2022 because there was a whole slaughtering of queer media that happened that we were personally victimized by. And so we're back because we've all been personally victimized again.
The story of our lives. Anyway, joining us today is our friend Chloe. Welcome to the podcast, Chloe.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Would you like to introduce our audience to you a little bit? Basically, what show brought you to us today?
Sure. I am here because of Our Flag Means Death, which is my favorite show of all time and something that really brought me into fandom and queer media. And as a lot of you probably know, it was canceled after its second season. It was only going to be 3 seasons, so we just needed one more. And it's been a very beloved, very successful show, but it was canceled. And we're still fighting for it. We're still upset about it. All the fandom is still here. But this show has changed my life and rewired my brain chemistry. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Never lose the fight.
Yes.
No, never.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere.
All right. So to begin this episode, we have a few statistics of where we are with queer media in TV. So disclaimer, we're only going to give a brief overview, not our full-length discussion that we did last time, where it's in-depth into every area. This is just a brief overview of the general state of representation. There is a lot more to this topic, but we're just focusing on this part right now. So basically, the state of representation for the LGBTQ plus community is in a decline, which is not good. I don't think anybody wants that.
No.
In the year of our Lord Lesbian Jesus 2024, not great. So yeah, the stats are just for we're looking at 2024 as a whole. That's what.
Well, I think it's 2023 to 2024 season.
Yeah.
Yes. So due to cancellations, 36% of LGBTQ plus characters on TV will not return for the next season. And that number is insane. Yeah, when I saw that, I'm like, what's left? I know there's 2/3, not even, left, but at the same time, that's a huge amount of representation that's leaving our screens, and 36% of people are now not going to be able to see themselves.
Yeah, which is weird because when we did the 2022 episode, one of the highlights was that representation overall is up, which is a good thing. But I guess when you're axing a bunch of shows, everyone's going too. But yeah, that's a lot.
Yes.
I know we'll talk more about Our Flag Means Death, but that show is so gay that it was probably carrying a lot of that representation too. So just in that one show getting canceled, there was it was a huge dent to queer representation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's definitely a couple of shows that are very queer and definitely carry all of a lot of numbers in it. So it's a shame that we're losing this media. LGBTQ inclusion on broadcast TV is at a 6-year low, with only 8.6% of series regular characters being LGBTQ, down 2% from the previous year.
That's still not a great figure, even at its high. 10% also not great.
No. And I'm trying to figure out, is 2% of 8.6%, or is it 2% of it used to be 10%?
Sounds like it's down 2% from the previous year. It sounds like it was at 10.6 and now we're at 8.6.
Yeah, that's insane.
Also not great.
No, none of these statistics are great that I'm about to read out. Like, we're
That's the
not
cheery
doing
section.
well. Like, we had a light at the end of the tunnel with our last episode of we are having more representation in general, so losing these shows, it's terrible, but there are still more out there. No, we're just losing things now.
Listen, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just not what you think.
Yes. It's
We'll
not what you think.
We'll get there. It's not what
you
think.
might not be ready for it.
Or maybe you are if you're listening. We'll see. Put it in the comments if you understand what I'm alluding to.
Okay, so I also have the decline in broadcast, cable, and streaming platforms. So, Theora, did you read these statistics?
No.
Okay, so without reading them,
okay,
do you think that there's the most decline in broadcast, cable, or streaming? And this goes for Chloe as well.
I would. Oh yeah. Do you want to guess, Chloe?
I would guess streaming, since that industry is in such crisis right now.
Right, and there's just more content coming out of it too. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine higher numbers, higher axings leads to more queer casualties.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that was a great guess, but it's wrong.
Oh.
Weird.
So the biggest decline in representation is from broadcast TV. So that was going to be networks like ABC, CBS, NBC, those channels.
Okay.
Which
channels that are trying to appeal to like a very broad audience?
Or just doing reality TV shows now.
Yeah.
They're unscripted.
Yeah, I mean, I believe the CW would, I think the CW is considered broadcast. And like they're axing everything. Because they're trying to change their demographic. And I don't know, it's cable, broadcast TV is in just like, where are we? Like, what the heck is going on? So broadcast TV in 2023 to 2024 had 8% LGBTQ plus characters. The previous year, it was 10.4. So there is a 23.1% decrease in representation. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Cable TV had a 6.5 decrease. So cable TV is winning. They did not decrease as much. And they are currently at 11.6% characters. Of their characters is LGBTQ. Streaming platforms. To be fair, the both of you were not off. They had a 16.6% decrease. But streaming platforms also have the highest amount of LGBTQ plus characters. They are currently at 12.1%, but the previous year was 14.5%.
Okay, and then these figures, is it just like the show included an LGBTQ character, or it's like they were a main character?
I think they included. I think it's like all representation. I can double check while editing and put it in here.
I'm just curious.
That's wrong, but yeah, I feel like any representation is good. I know main characters are like, that's what we want to see more.
No, I know. I'm just wondering, like, yeah. So like
the numbers
on average, like 10% of characters in something are LGBTQ is what I'm hearing from this.
Yeah, I know. And something. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know it's really hard to answer this question because it's not like an apples to apples comparison. But is there any way to compare this to just cancellations in general? Like, are queer media being like disproportionately targeted in cancellations? Because it sure feels like it.
Yeah, that was literally the theme of our 2022 episode, where we're trying to figure out, like, are we being targeted? And the answer was like, no. It's just because we had such a small number of like characters to begin with, the impact felt greater for basically us, because we were just had less, and then they axed everything.
Yeah.
I believe,
but we didn't go into that here.
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers, but I do know that it's like either 37 or 40 something total shows have gotten canceled in the past year, and it was like below 20 was like the LGBTQ shows.
I think that's what it was last time too. I'm around that.
So I know that just a lot of things are being canceled, and the entertainment industry is kind of a mess right now, and
Yeah.
sort of having a lot of like come to Jesus moments. So I don't know that queer media has been getting disproportionately targeted, but I also don't know that it's not, because I know we're also facing this kind of cultural backlash to progressivism and queerness and everything like that right now. So I don't think that could be ruled out.
That's definitely
I
true
agree.
because there is a big population, especially right now we're focusing on media in the United States, basically. So, and in the United States, we are not doing great with um, representation for the LGBTQ community in general.
Yeah.
A lot of rights are being taken away, and there has been a lot of backlash for companies supporting the LGBTQ community in general. So there is a lot more hesitance to produce things that are for this community. And that's unfortunately an impact of these things. I don't know exactly if this has an impact on productions. I don't think anyone can really know unless they're in these productions because there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. But it's definitely can't be ruled out. You're right. Okay, so Chloe,
Yes.
we noticed that you are a neuroscience PhD researcher and writer. What
Yes.
impact does beloved media cancellations have on the mental health of the LGBTQ audience?
Very bad. That is the short answer, but the details of it is that these are real stressors. And I to be clear, I do not do research on this specific topic, like the effects of representation and rejection and things like that. But I do research on stress. And I know that experiencing stress in the form of rejection, in the form of feeling like there's not a place for you and sort of who you are is not okay, because people who look like you on screen are not staying up there, that is an actual stressor. And an accumulation of stressors leads to genuine like depression, anxiety, mental health symptoms. And in addition to that, like from the perspective of the brain, like our brain doesn't differentiate between social connections to characters on a screen or in a book and like real life connections. Like we are storytelling beings, and how we connect with other people and learn new things is like through storytelling. And so those like emotional connections that we form with those characters in queer media or any media is really real. And so when those shows that we have an emotional connection to in the context of queer media, if that queer connection is fueling that, when those are canceled, that's like a real actual grief and a real actual loss of like a friendship or a relationship. Like it feels the same to our brains and our bodies. And I know a lot of people will be like, "Oh, it's just a show," and kind of like, get over it, like it's not that big of a deal. But again, like from our brain's perspective, it's really not that different than if a friend moved far away or passed away or something like that. Like there is a loss there that actually hurts. So it's real. It's very real.
That's so true. Like I know growing up, TV was my one constant in life because everything else was so unsure. So it's like having a friend that's always there for you and you know that you can always hang
Yeah,
out with them. And then having that being taken away from you, it hurts so much.
it really does. And like people you really identify with and feel camaraderie with, feel like you have shared experiences in your life, especially if it's like a queer story that you're like, we have this in common. to lose that really impacts you. And like, these have actual effects on the brain, like, to feel like there is a place for you and that you have like the kind of right to be represented and kind of be seen for who you are, reflected in media, is really like manifests at a neurological level. And then when that kind of feeling of like trust that who you are out there in the world is okay, and people who have similar stories as you, when that's taken away, it actually activates a stress response and a grief that has real psychological consequences. So it's, as our flag means death says, it's about belonging to something, and that's so important, not just in like kind of entertainment value, but real psychological well-being.
This brings me back, at least, to last spring, when basically everyone was having a rough time on the podcast and we had to take a break. And
Yeah,
amidst this like external stuff going on for some of us, there was a big cancellation that happened at the same time. So Theora, do you want to talk about the cancellation that impacted you the most?
Oh, sure. I was gonna let Chloe go first, but you set me up so nicely for that. All right, so
Chloe set us up so nicely for it.
Good job, Chloe.
I'm on it.
They're killing it. All right, so I'll talk about the one that impacted me the most. So it was the cancellation of A League of Their Own, the series. It was canceled not once, but twice. Just for fun. So basically, when it aired, it was 8 episodes through Amazon Prime, and then it did fairly well. But when it was canceled, when it like was in its renewal period, was when the writers' actors strike was going on, which lasted quite a bit of time. And so we're like waiting for renewal. The second season did get greenlit. It was months later, which the longer you wait for that renewal announcement, the more anxiety builds. And so it was greenlit in April of 2023. And it was announced that it would be a shortened and final season. Something that was already 8 episodes is going to get shortened to 4 to wrap up all these plot lines, which is insane, first of all. But it was like, okay, we'll get closure. Because the biggest problem I have with all these cancellations is you never get closure with the story. And it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're like, yay, we're getting something. We're getting closure. 4 months after that, so in August of 2023, Amazon scrapped the entire project. And according to like one of the Variety, which broke the story, to quote, according to sources, the show was another casualty of Hollywood's ongoing strike. With Hollywood's writers and actors still on strike, there was no hope of production beginning on season 2 anytime soon. They would likely mean the second season would not debut before 2025, when season 1 aired in 2022. Which like seems like such a cop-out, because then you got things like House of Dragon, and it's like 5 years in between seasons. So like, which is not great either, because then you're like, what was this show about? You have to like refresh yourself with this complicated fantasy world. But anyway.
But also The Last of Us, Yellow Jackets, Sex Lives, all of them have the same timelines.
Right. So this was such bullshit, first of all. So yeah, that one hurt me the most. And we have another section about like why, like what the show meant to you. So this is an intro to the things that caused us personal grievances. So like to lose it not once but twice was what hurt a lot.
It was insane. But also I feel like a 4 episode season, again, I'll take anything, but it was such a slap in the face, especially for like the creators. Like, it's an ensemble show in general. Like, yeah, there's like kind of mains, but there's a lot of storylines. And to have to wrap it up in 4 episodes, they better have given them like a movie for each episode to make up for it.
A lot of what you described in that experience, like, it's so true for the Our Flag Means Death cancellation as well. Like, even when season 2 was airing before it finished, we were campaigning for it to be renewed and had a petition going that's still up there. I think it has like 85,000 signatures or something like that. And there were signs pointing to renewal. And then the creator, David Jenkins, came on and broke the bad news that it was canceled. And obviously we were fighting for it, but the studio, Max, gave a lot of bullshit reasons for its cancellation, that the numbers weren't there, which they definitely were in terms of the popularity of the show and the viewership compared to shows that were renewed, their numbers. And then they came out and were like, oh, actually, we were just concerned about violence in the show and we weren't sure how to market that. And we're all like, you guys do like Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Like, this is like a pirate comedy. Like, what are you talking about? So we were still fighting for the show, but then I also feel like we went through like a second cancellation because after about a month from the original cancellation, David Jenkins came back on social media and said that this really is the end of the road of the show for now. And so that really felt like second cancellation because he came in to tell us to stand down and we were spending like a lot of money on campaigns. We put a billboard up in Times Square. We flew a banner plane over Warner Brothers headquarters. So we haven't totally given up hope because maybe he was just kind of trying to look out for us, like saying in the current landscape of the industry, there's not a path forward right now, so stop spending your money. But we're still hoping that if Max gets sold or something like that, because Warner Brothers Discovery is doing terrible right now, that there might be new life for the show. But between the half-ass explanations and the double whammy of cancellations, it feels really similar to what you just described with A League of Their Own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out which show impacted me the most. But like both of the shows that you brought up have been like such a huge they meant so much to fans in general. Like they're both very great explanations of why we're here today talking about this, because it's insane that these shows with so much representation and so many people who love it. I mean, that both casts are very filled with queer characters, but also great actors, like with big names. Mm-hmm. So I remember when A League of Their Own came out, and we were like, if this gets canceled, there's no hope for any show.
Yeah.
So as soon as it was like 4 episodes and that's it, we were like, well, shit. What does this mean for every other show? Because we've been saying if this doesn't get renewed, what hope do we have? So at least for me, I was like, well, shit, my hope just disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's insane.
Truly, I still feel that way. Because, what made it so... And the reason I kept saying that is because it's not just that, it's a show I loved and, there's a queer character. The whole there were so many queer characters. And it's like Our Flag Means Death, where it's not just the ship that you're shipping. It's there's multiple queer characters and multiple different kinds of representation, just diversity in general in the cast. And it's a cast that works well together. It's a story that's well thought out. It was well put together. So, to me, those shows getting canceled tells me that, it's going to be really hard for similar shows with diverse queer casts to get multiple seasons because they don't seem to do well. The things that seem to survive is, the token queer character mixed in the ensemble.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's exactly what you just described is one of the reasons that Our Flag Means Death stood out to me so much and meant so much to me, and why its cancellation hurt so much, because it wasn't queer representation in this otherwise cishet normative storyline. It was like the whole show just radiated queerness in every dimension of it, not just the relationships, but the gender expression, the costumes, the set, just like everything was such, it felt so gay. And to lose that, like, to have something that really feels like this is for us, this is ours, and then to have that canceled was just a punch in the gut.
And also they were funny. Like, they were both
I
comedies.
know.
Like, they're so similar. Like,
Yeah.
and we don't get a lot of queer comedies.
No.
It's usually
Mhm.
sad as fuck.
Yeah.
That's all
Yeah,
we
that's
get.
a big
It's just
thing.
drama.
Oh my gosh, the comedies keep getting
The
canceled.
comedies. Yeah.
And it's so sad. I'm going to talk about a show really quickly because we have Amazon represented, Max represented. You can't talk about cancellations without talking about Netflix.
Oh man, we trashed on them last time though. You're not gonna give them a break. No, don't give them a break.
No, because there is a show that came out right before the strikes or during the strikes. So everything, I think it was like the month.
I think it was right before.
But like the writer strike was going on. It was right before the actor strike. Forgot there's 2 different strikes going on. So the show's called Glamorous. And I think it's one of the queerest shows that's ever been on Netflix. Because I'm pretty sure there were more queer characters than straight cisgender ones. And I think that can be said about all the shows we've talked about, which is even sadder because all the shows that made the biggest impact, of course, for us, is going to be the ones with more queer characters than straight cisgender ones.
And for the first season of Our Flag Means Death, sorry, quick interjection, Taika Waititi, who's one of the stars and also executive producer of the show, joked once in an interview that Our Flag Means Death was like Spot the Hetero.
Yeah, I love it.
Those are the best shows.
I know. Not enough of them.
No.
And
No.
sorry, Kaitlynn, continue.
No, you're totally fine. That is how this podcast goes. You think of something, just say it.
Yep.
But yeah, the show Glamorous, I remember loving this show, and I wouldn't shut up to Theora about it. And I made Theora watch it with me. So that it makes it even more fun when you have someone to watch it with you. And that's the beauty of this podcast in general as well. And why I think people love reaction videos, because it's like you're watching it with somebody. So I will always cherish that time where Theora and her wife watched the pilot with me, and we just pointed out every single lens flare that they had. But it was such a fun time, and there was so much representation, and the ending was just beautiful with the main character finding their gender representation, gender identity, and I'll get into it later, but I was really hoping to see more with that. Another show that I finally just watched, and I'm so mad, and I've been telling Theora I'm so mad I didn't watch it before, is Girls 5 Eva. Now,
it's so
only
good.
One of the characters are queer, but they have more characters that come in for their storylines. But it's so funny. Again, I love the comedies. We need more queer comedy, which I guess I'm just going to put something in because go watch These Thems if you want a queer comedy.
I love These Thems.
Awesome.
Well,
That's
I found
an awesome web series
through Vico, who plays Jim in Our Flag Means Death.
Oh, it was so funny. I think about it all the time. It's a great, great show, and I hope they get to do more. But again, if we put it in the studio's hands, I'm really worried.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, Girls 5 Eva, I also recommend people go watch because I didn't see anything about it, and between the name and I don't even know if I read the description, but I just kept passing over because I thought it was something different. And then Theora's like, "This is the best show." Not ever, because obviously
Theora. Obviously, Our Flag Means Death is the best show ever.
Yes. But Theora's like, I love this so much. I think you're gonna love it, and it still took me 2 months to watch it. So it's just like, also the advertising and that is something that studios need to do better, because there are shows that they advertise the hell out of, but then other shows just get like soft launched. I'm like, how is anybody supposed to find it?
Yeah,
I mean, again, A League of Their Own was a different story because like they did have a lot of
They
advertising.
did advertise. Like, I remember in San Francisco where I live, there was like at the bus stops they had posters. I think they had the actors go to like, it might have been LA Dodgers. Like they went to a baseball game and like they had money for advertising, so it's a little bit different. But most shows, yeah, you're right. They're just like, it drops. That's it. It was a moment in time kind of thing.
Try to find it.
Yeah, I think it actually might have been your podcast about queer cancellations back in 2022 where I really learned that about how studios will kind of set shows up for failure by not advertising them. And I think this happened with Our Flag Means Death too, which didn't fail, by the way. Like, despite the lack of advertising, it did really well. But they won't sufficiently advertise a show and then be like, oh, people weren't really interested in it enough, so they cancel it. So it's like they kind of have this predetermined agenda for what makes it or not. And they'll also drop the ball on like merch for queer shows. At least this happened with Our Flag Means Death. Like, Max didn't have any merch for it, any good merch. They had like a couple pieces, but the fandom in Our Flag Means Death has like made amazing art, t-shirts, stuff like that everyone's like drops a lot of money for. And many times something has come up where we've been like, if Max had actually made this shirt or whatever, like they could have made so much money. So with advertising and merch and stuff, like they're just not investing in these shows.
Yeah, it's wild. The most wild thing to me is when they make the thing. Like, this is with movies. I think we may have talked about this, but I can't remember. They'll like make the whole thing and then be like, nah, and just not even show it. And it's like,
that's
like
what Max did.
Mm-hmm. Like Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies.
Yeah, that was another sad one.
Luckily, we still do have access to it. So.
And then we talked about that too in the Cancel Your Cruise 2022. Willow, we just covered Willow, where we're taking it completely off of our streaming platform, and now that you don't have the tangible like physical copy you can buy anymore, once it's gone, and now like that entire audience is screwed out of watching their show, and then you cannot have a new audience that might find it, which that was the whole point of TV. And we talked about this in our last episode about this, and I won't like berate the dead horse here, but like I think the binging model has to go, because you can't, the point of TV is to like, it's more character growth focused than anything else, and the characters are meant to build and stumble, and you're supposed to have rest episodes where they're just growing, and like now they're basically just like a mini series. It's like a movie where it's like go 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 go. And I remember we've watched stuff together, and you're like, why this episode is so slow, and like it's the anxiety because you're used to it being fast because you're shortened with how many episodes you get, and so it's like it's not what TV was ever meant to be. And when you just dump it all, you lose your ability to effectively advertise. You lose the ability to like gain a bigger, build an audience, because part of what makes TV so successful in the modern world is like people talking about it on social media. And so like when things are releasing weekly, people talk about it more because you're in anticipation of the next episode. And then people find it and they're like, what is this show? And that's how you like build an audience. But when you like dump the whole thing, people are excited about it the day they get it, and then like all that excitement just wanes and you don't capture the new people. So I think binging sets shows up for failure more than anything else.
There is people doing this well, but stay tuned to the end to find out who's doing well with this model. Not the binging model.
It's not a binging model. It doesn't work. All right.
I did see a tweet where people were saying how studios are just relying on fans to do all the marketing for them now, because people are so willingly like trying to get the word out, but it's because we have to.
Yeah.
Because if not, then like so many people are trying to figure out how to game the system with like, just keep it on in the background, keep watching it. Like you don't even have to pay attention, but if you watch it now, watch it then. Like you have to do it within this certain period. And it's basically a game at this point. And then it's still not guaranteed to work. And
Yes.
it's just very hard for everybody.
To add on to that, a problem that I think is part of it, not specific to queer media, but just kind of the streaming or entertainment industry in general, is that there's a focus on metrics that are then fed into like predictive models or analytical models about how well a show is going to perform, what the revenue is going to be relative to the cost, things like that. And I don't know the details of how these work, but that mode of judging success or failure of a show seems very short-sighted and only like means something for a period of a month or a couple of weeks or something like that, and doesn't have this long-term vision that also depends on intangibles like queer, like word of mouth, advertising, people hype growing for the show, but also like maintaining trust of your consumer base and not violating that trust by not finishing the stories. And that sort of long-term benefit is not something that I think models can really predict that well, as far as I know. Like for Max and Our Flag Means Death, like maybe they had some model that was like, this show is worth canceling because of this like success to expense ratio or whatever. But now a huge like swath of consumers are like, will have nothing to do with Max anymore. And I'm one of them. I'm like, you totally betrayed us on this. And I'm so mad that you canceled this show that like I'm out. And that's going to hurt them like years down the road. And I don't think studios are really factoring that in.
Yeah, I agree. There's the individual studio, like you're saying in your example, but I think there's a broader implication of that too. And we might have talked about this in the other episode that I keep referencing. Go listen to that. Where basically, like, it also, like, people have trauma behavior now because of all these cancellations where I know a bunch of people who are like, I won't even start a show unless it's complete. Because if I don't want to get invested and then they cancel it and I'm left on red forever. Like, why would I waste my time? I'll rewatch things I already love, and just, if you want to make a new show, complete it, then I'll go watch it all.
Yeah.
So then again, you're not getting, that will impact your numbers because you won't get the number till the end, because consumers are like, I'm not even going to bother watching this at all.
Totally. I just speaking for myself, I experienced that, especially after this cancellation. And like in the outline you sent for the show, one question was, what TV shows, if any, are you watching now or looking forward to? And I'm like, none. Like, I got too hurt. Like, I don't want to invest in something until I know it's going to be complete and I'm not going to get hurt again.
And that's totally valid.
Okay, but let's talk about happy things. So, okay, let's go back to our shows that got canceled that meant something to us. So, Chloe, you touched on this a little bit, but what did Our Flag what does Our Flag Means Death mean to you? Like, why was the cancellation so impactful?
Oh my gosh. And like I said before, I think one of the big things was that it was just this beautifully, beautifully queer story that wasn't just queer characters on the sidelines or a side plot or in the foreground as the main characters, but in an otherwise sort of like normative cultural vibe of the plot. Like, just everything about this show was so queer. But I think what really made it stand out as a queer show, but also just a show in general, is that somehow simultaneously it's like the gayest show you've ever seen, but it's also not this niche show that just has a target queer audience. Like, from my experience with queer media in the past, shows make queerness appealing to a wide audience by kind of like putting it off to the side or sort of minimizing it or kind of like having an otherwise kind of cishet feel to it, even if there is a same-sex couple, for instance. But Our Flag Means Death does not do that. They have a show that does not compromise at all on queerness and is appealing to like a really wide audience. And I think the fact that it does that just shows how queer stories are human stories about belonging and about finding yourself and finding people that you connect with in a world that you otherwise don't fit into. And I think that's a really universal experience that everyone can relate to, even if they're not queer. So by kind of having this queer story and this universal human theme really like invites people in who are not queer. And an example of this, I think, is like the character Jim, who is non-binary and is referred to with they, them pronouns in the show. But their pronouns, their gender identity is never directly referenced or stated. Neither is anybody's sexuality, like gay, queer, non-binary, like none of these words are ever used in the show.
They only establish that Jim is not a mermaid.
Jim is not a mermaid. Yes. This is the explicitly stated thing that we know about. Yes. I love that. Now there's a ton of like people in the fandom who are gender queer, gender non-conforming, who have like a shirt or something that is like not a fucking mermaid. I love it. But the show does that in a way that it's like, so sometimes I think when it's we're not using the term gay or queer or non-binary or whatever, it can kind of feel like a sort of, we're trying to make it more palatable, like a don't say gay kind of way, or that sort of thing back from, I don't know, the 90s or the 2000s or whatever, that was like, I'm okay with, you know, being gay, just don't like shove it in my face sort of thing. But Our Flag Means Death, the fact that it doesn't like use those terms is not that don't say gay thing at all. It's another way that like kind of invites people in. So for the example of Jim as a character, if it was kind of explicitly set up that this character is non-binary, my cat is batting something off the desk, that Jim is non-binary, like, and they kind of go through a little bit of that journey in the show, then people who are not questioning their gender or who can't really relate to that experience might kind of tune out and be like, okay, well, that's not really for me. But because the show doesn't do that, like everybody, regardless of who they are, is like invited to connect with Jim as a character. And similarly with the same-sex relationships in the show, because they're not presented as something different than people who aren't queer, don't have same-sex attraction themselves, like are still invited to see themselves in these characters and connect with these characters. So that's one of the things I find so special about this show, and how it manages to be so uncompromisingly queer, but in a way that invites everybody into that space and not presenting it as like, this is only for queer people. And if you're not queer, like you can't connect with this, because since it touches on those universal themes, people can see like, oh, this queer story is like part of the human story. And we can all connect with the struggles and the joys and everything that these characters experience. And I just haven't encountered another show that's pulled that off.
Yeah, and I like what you said, that this is like a human story and it's like part of the human experience, because That's why one of the reasons I love A League of Their Own so much. It has this in common with Our Flag Means Death, that they're both pulling from things that actually happened in history. So you have the grounding of these people existed. This is a fictionalization of these people, but these people were real. So if we're telling the right story, remember they were real. So it also like grounds it and makes it less fantastical if you're like, this is based on real people. And so for A League of Their Own, for me, the reason I have connected with this story since I was a kid, and the movie came out, the Penny Marshall movie in 1992, because this was a real thing that happened where in America during World War II, where men went off to fight the war, men got drafted, there was a labor shortage. And so people who stepped up to fill the role of the labor shortages were women, Black people, people who weren't allowed to in those white cis men spaces now took one for the country or whatever, and were filling all these jobs to keep everything going. And one of the areas was entertainment, which at the time was baseball. Like, baseball is the national pastime of America. It's a big deal. Like, my family is very connected by baseball. We were one of those families where like that was the glue that held everybody together. And I was very raised. I was very raised in that environment. And so it means a lot. And so and as a kid, when I grew up, like I knew so much about baseball. Our family has their team, and that was the religion and kind of thing. But it was men. And I never felt like, I was like, I want to play baseball too. But then to learn as I got older, oh, you're a woman, you can't, was like one of the most crushing experiences of my life. So to see this movie where it's like, oh, women at one point in time lived my dream of playing professional baseball. Like, that was the first time in my entire life I ever felt represented in media, was watching that and being like, this really happened too. Like, this was actually a possibility. I was just born in the wrong decade.
Yeah. I totally hear that. I think that the historical context of Our Flag Means Death, I think, does a lot of that too. And it is like, it's a little bit different because the show is not very historically accurate. It's like very intentionally, deliberately anachronistic to comedic or storytelling effect. But it is still very inspired by this historical story of Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate who left his comfortable land-owning life to go be a pirate for God knows why, connected with the infamous Blackbeard. And Blackbeard was like, this guy's a terrible pirate, like, just come on my ship and hang out and read your books. And so then the David Jenkins, like, I think his ex-wife saw this on a Wikipedia page and talked to him about it, and they were like, oh, there's a love story here, and turned it into that. And we don't know the real history, but it had just opened people's minds. Like, there's a actual historical biographer of Stede Bonnet who watched the show and said it actually kind of changed his thought about the historical Stede Bonnet, and was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. Is like, maybe he and Blackbeard were in a relationship. So I just think that's so cool. Like, and that's like the power of representation, right? Where people like,
and they weren't just shipmates.
They weren't just shipmates. Exactly. Yeah. Like that really infamous historians looking back on like these two women who never married and were buried next to each other and only had a house with one bed. And they're like, oh, they were like such good friends.
They're like sisters. Come on, guys.
Yeah. So just to like present that story and have people be like, oh yeah, like maybe there were gay people throughout history. The whole time.
Shocking.
And the historical context of Our Flag Means Death works really well for telling this type of story too, in the setting of piracy, because I don't want to sort of romanticize piracy kind of unnecessarily, but it was a place where people who otherwise didn't fit into society went. And formed their own society and their own like rules of operating in their own culture, and even had basically same-sex marriages between sailors who were predominantly men, though there were some women involved too, but that they entered into an arrangement of like, if I die at sea, like my partner gets all my stuff and things like that. So it was historically like very queer, and the show really leans into that as like part of the queer experience is kind of not fitting into society and sort of needing to make your own way. And there's a universal appeal of piracy, even for not queer people, and the kind of adventure and lawlessness of it. And then I think making that show explicitly, that setting explicitly queer in the show, also invites people in who might not have otherwise seen queerness in it and then been like, oh yeah, maybe this was how things were. There was this deep queerness here, and now there's this thing that I relate to that is queer, and now I feel more connected to queerness in a way I didn't before.
So with Glamorous, I think I really liked that it was just showing queer people working in an office. Because it's a queer, the Bold Type. If you've seen the Bold Type, I love that show as well. It's one of my favorites. But this one makes it even queerer. And I love it because I just kind of want to work in an office setting like this where you can just be queer and like not have to hide it. Because I feel like when you go into an office setting, you have to hide your entire personality. And obviously being queer is not your entire personality, but I feel like society makes you feel like you have to hide like any bit of it. And also being part of an office that you're not the only queer person, because I've never been part of an office where there was more than one queer person, because like I'm always like the token queer person. Like if anyone brings up any like gay things or same-sex relationships, everyone just looks at you. It's like, what do you have to say? Or you'll look like I had a conversation with my boss and she's like, oh, you'll like this one. So this doctor and her wife, I'm like, I mean, yes, I do love it. I love when I hear about queer people, but like, I don't want that reputation that like I only pay attention if it has to do with queer people. So it's just nice to be able to see an office that's so queer, but it's not the focus. Like, yeah, there's all that going on, but they are able to do like these creative jobs as well and like bring new ideas and just have it widely accepted instead of being like, oh, you need to hide who you are. And that's why I really loved it. And I am sad that it got canceled. But I'm also having a hard time getting as attached to shows. I don't know if it's because shows keep getting canceled and I'm like, okay, you can love a show, but you're not allowed to get so attached that this is your lifeline anymore. Because there was shows like that, and I was just like, I'm still not over Teenage Bounty Hunters getting canceled on Netflix. I'll never be over that one. But I also think with the podcast and like we jump shows so much that I'm so used to just jumping into new fandoms that I think it's like actually a skill at this point to like not get attached, which is sad in the same sense though, because like I like to get attached to shows. The last show I got attached to was High School Musical, the series. But that also got canceled, but technically it just ended because it had 4 seasons and it wrapped up. Like
It ended, yeah.
I know people are upset about it, but I think it had a nice ending. It's not like A League of Their Own. I mean, at least our Five Muse that did not end on a cliffhanger, because that could have been really bad.
Yeah, it would have been absolutely devastating. Season 1 ended on a very angsty, heart-wrenching cliffhanger. And I came to the fandom late. I watched season 1 after it had all come out, after we had gotten news that season 2 was coming. So I have like unending respect for the fans who had to live through the period of waiting with that cliffhanger, because as much as this show has meant to me, if it had ended after season 1, I would have wished I hadn't watched it, because it would have hurt too much. And that saying, like, it's better to have loved and lost than never have loved at all. Like, if it had ended at season 1, that would have not been true. I would have just been like, I wish I would have never seen that, because it's just unending heartbreak. Thankfully, we did get season 2, and it did wrap up in a way that is okay. But that was also not just fortuitous. That was very intentional on the creator David Jenkins' part, because he knew this might happen. And I think it's frustrating that he had to factor that in when deciding how to end season 2. I'm so grateful he did, so we can at least kind of have some resolution. But this happened to him with his first show, People of Earth, that was canceled after 2 seasons. I think it was after 2 seasons, on like an absolute cliffhanger. And that's just intolerable. And it's especially, like, if it's a plot line where you're like, oh, I really want to know what happened, that's one thing. But with Our Flag Means Death, when it's like this central relationship, and like, do they find each other again? Are they able to kind of like work through their traumas and be together? Like, that runs a little deeper emotionally than just kind of the logistics of what happens. So I'm so grateful that season 2 did end on a place where like we can be okay. But we're not done fighting for it.
Obviously,
too.
we want more.
Obviously, we want more.
There's so much more to happen. Like, because they did leave it on a place where, yes, it technically wrapped up, but it opens so many more stories as well.
Yeah,
because also, I want to see Morjang.
I want to see Morjang too. She's the best. And I want to see Morjang. I want to know how like the Ricky plotline plays out. But also I just want more Ed and Steed, because David Jenkins too said he wanted to do a love story that doesn't end when the main couple gets together, because that's only the beginning of a relationship. And he wanted the opportunity to explore what happens after that part. And with Ed and Steed, there's so much to explore there, because they both have their own traumas and insecurities that have made them struggle so much in life and love. And to go through the process of kind of like working through that together would be beautiful, and showing that like in a good relationship you can be loved for who you are, like you can heal these traumas. And I think it would really show that like healthy relationships are healing. It's not like you can't be in a healthy relationship until you heal. Like, the process of being loved is healing, and we need those relationships. And I really wanted to see that play out on an emotional level. Yeah, and it's just like such a fun, entertaining show, and I wanted more of that comedy and that wackiness too. One more season. That's all we wanted. It was only ever intended to be 3 seasons.
That's the annoying
part. It was really only intended to be 3 seasons?
Yeah, it was always just
from the beginning. From the very beginning.
Season, Max.
I know.
Like, what the hell?
I know.
Just
So
finish
stupid.
it out.
I know.
You're committed this far.
I know. It's I will never get over it. Yeah, from the very beginning, like, it was pitched, this is a 3-season show. Like, it's not a show that we're going to kind of like drag out, which I respect too, because sometimes shows kind of like jump the shark a little bit.
Grey's Anatomy.
Hey, Theora, I just got here.
No, it needs to let it go.
Yeah. Honestly, I'll talk about it in a little bit, but like, with the way they're handling the queer characters at this point, maybe yes. I mean, it's been 21 seasons now, so yes.
All right, Kaitlynn, in your show, what would you have liked to see happen if like Glamorous continued?
I think just more of them figuring their shit out in the office, and then also just Marco and their gender identity story. And I don't want to give anything away in case people want to watch it, because like it does wrap up in a way that is nice. Like it's very, it almost made me cry, honestly, but it's very heartwarming in a sense. I mean, obviously there is, you would love to see more, but it's very happy at the end. I will say that. So it's not like someone
Warrior
dies.
Nun.
No one's getting sucked into the space butthole.
The actual worst, like just being left unread forever, was the end of Warrior Nun. I was like, yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
that's valid. For A League of Their Own, spoiler. I would like to see Carson's divorce and her reunion with Greta, because also left unread forever. But the big thing I really wanted to see from that show is just more of the historical stuff, because again, it was an ensemble and you had multiple characters from Cuba, which was historically accurate. And at one point, I think it was in 1947, the league did spring training in Cuba. So I would love to have seen the Peaches go to Cuba, and then you get the Cuban characters can actually like explore their background, and you get to see like what Cuba looked like in 1947, and maybe Jackie Robinson cameo. Like it would have been really cool to have like, I just love the historical element of it. It's very fun to like see that world and see it through queer lenses. And the show, where it deviated from the movie, is you explicitly got to see what was going on with the Black community, because you don't see that. There's like a hot second of it, and they had to tone it down in the movie because racism. But like in the show, they actually like show you what's going on through multiple characters, and so to have that also would have been really interesting. So I just feel unread for the possibilities that they had with that diverse cast to like explore plot lines that the movie could never have even addressed if it wanted to. So yeah, but who knows? We'll see what happens in the future. But throwing this question out to everybody, we've talked about what these studios are doing wrong, how they're causing trauma. So what can these studios do better for the LGBTQ like representation for the community? Like, if you had the chance to be like, yo, Max,
oh my gosh,
here's what I would say to do. Chloe, what do you think?
Finish our stories, listen to us, like listen to what people actually want and what people are saying, and also capitalize on us. Like, you know, if you're motivated by capitalism, like we can do that too. Like, give us good merch and give us good representation and finish our stories, and we'll keep throwing money at you. So like, we're seriously,
we will give money to you.
We will. Like, it frustrates me so much with Max, because a lot of the criticism against them is that they're like just motivated by like this kind of hard line capitalism, which, you know, I think there's truth to that. And, you know, these are ultimately money-making businesses. But like I was talking about before, I think things like trust in your consumer base needs to be more part of that, and kind of a long-term vision. But also, even if you're just motivated by like the financial bottom line, like you're not even doing that well. Like you're not even doing a good job at capitalism. Like you could make so much more money off of us if you gave us what we wanted. But more seriously,
the queer community in general is just so loyal. Mm-hmm. Like if you really target the queer community in a good way, you will have lifelong fans. So
yeah,
really alienating a whole.
I know. I've totally felt that way if another studio picks up Our Flag Means Death, which, as a kind of contextual side note, all the sort of evidence points to that David Jenkins was marketing it to like Apple TV and Netflix and Prime, and there was interest, but Max was not, or Warner Brothers. I'm never sure if it's the parent company or the sub company, decided not to sell. But if another studio picks it up, like that studio will have my undying loyalty, even when that show is done. Like, I will just be so grateful and also have trust in them that they care about these stories. So yeah, I think we are a very loyal fan base because we do want really good representation. So if someone gives that, like, we will stay there. But I also think that studios just need to, like, recognize the humanity and universal appeal of queer stories, like I was talking about before, and not kind of treat them as this really niche market, and also not treat them as something that you need to make palatable to non-queer people just by having it as a side storyline or like an otherwise kind of mainstream show. Like, to look at something like Our Flag Means Death or A League of Their Own and kind of see what made those shows so appealing and what made them so popular. And I think some of it was like the uncompromising queerness together with the like relatableness of it and the widely appealing storyline and characters and ensemble and historical context and everything like that. So to actually like look at what makes these stories successful, and that queerness isn't just this kind of like little niche over here that only some people are interested in. There's universal appeal there.
Very, very well said. I agree with all of that. Kaitlynn, do you want to give your advice before I go off on a rant?
Yes, because I know yours is good. Theora,
I got some advice.
Yeah, so I know that the studios are at fault here and are in control, but I wish productions would just film 2 endings. If they're not going to just make it like kind of wrapped up, if they really want to have a cliffhanger, make sure that you have something to like put in instead in case you get canceled, because I feel like the cliffhangers, it's what's making everything hurt even more. Because I mean, thank God fan fiction exists in general, but it'd be nice to see it on the screen.
Yeah.
And not be like, what the hell is going to happen? Like,
yeah.
This is the worst ending.
Yeah. I would love that too. I wish we didn't have to do that though, because sometimes those cliffhangers is really good storytelling, and it's like in a perfect world, people wouldn't have to compromise on the storytelling for fear of not getting renewed.
Or I wish it was a requirement for the studios to give them like an hour wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
Like come back just for
an
hour. Like I know it'd be like really quick, terrible story. I mean, maybe they can figure out how to story tell it well, but just something to wrap it up.
Yeah, like some clause in the contract of the show that like, if you cancel this show, it's like you have to give like some kind of severance package where like you at least give a final episode or something to wrap it up.
Honestly, I would take an outline of what was supposed to happen. Just give us an outline, and then the fanfic writers can take it.
I mean, bringing it back to money, Kaitlynn, either way you could make money off of that, because like if it gets renewed, be like, here, like in the interim, be like, here's the alternate ending, and it brings up hype again, and like you can get viewers and make money off of that. And if it doesn't, you do the same thing, be like, it's canceled, but here's like our last hurrah, and then everybody gets closure, and then like the studio makes a bit of money off the last alternate ending release or whatever. So like either way, like money is to be, there's a good incentive for that, I feel, from a Mr. Monopoly
and while they're at it, make DVDs with bonus commentary and bloopers and all this stuff that we would spend so much money on.
Bloopers, man, everyone would pay for bloopers.
Mm-hmm. That was make lost a Patreon with screaming. Okay. But I think there's a real world example of how studios in America can do better. I think you guys can learn from Thailand. So let's talk about Thailand for a minute, because they have a renaissance of queer media happening right now that's insane and amazing. So they have recently been producing a remarkable amount of queer content. And so when I mean queer content, I don't just mean in America where like 10% of the characters are queer. No, these are productions where like the leads are queer, and then there's multiple queer characters in the show. So it's not tokenism. It's like everything is queer about it, which is my favorite kind of content. What's different about the way they do television is it's primarily like a single season story. So it's kind of like the American equivalent would be like the mini series. So if you look at something like The Queen's Gambit, which was wildly successful, but it was marketed as a once it's over, it's over. Telling your audience who's traumatized that like, hey, the whole story is going to get told. There is no being left unread. The whole thing will happen. And I feel like as a viewer, at least for me, I feel like I can relax and enjoy the show because when you're not in that model, you said it yourself, Chloe, earlier, like once the show starts airing, the fans are already like, we have to campaign. There's like an extra stress to watching the show where I feel like you can't enjoy it like you normally would because you're stressed out about like numbers, viewership, engagement, all the stuff that isn't our job to be worried about. We're not worried about because we're afraid we're going to lose the show. Whereas like in Thailand, it's like, you're going to get the whole show. There's nothing to freak out about. It's happening. Like, here it is. Like, you're going to get the whole thing. No being left unread. No cancellation. You're going to get the whole story. And what I also love about their model is that they broadcast it. I think it's broadcasting mostly, not streaming. Although some of them put it on like Netflix and things like that. But like, it's broadcast. And then what they do is they take their episodes and they put it on YouTube. So it's universally like accessible to so many different people versus in the American model. One of the problems we have going on right now, there are too many streamers. And in order to access content from a streamer, you have to pay money to the individual streamer. So if like things are happening on a streaming platform, I can't access because money's short right now, I will never see that queer content. I can't help support it because there's a financial barrier versus like putting it on YouTube. Everyone can see it and you can see the numbers right then and there, like how well this thing is doing. And like, they're super proud of it. They're like, look, this got 1 million views in one day. And it's like, okay, cool. And because they did one show, which I'm sure our viewers are aware of, called Gap the Series, this thing was so freaking popular internationally that 50 projects are greenlit because of this one show. And they have independent studios that are cropping up to do this. And it's really, their model is completely different and really fascinating. And it's just, that's how you do queer content. Like, give us the whole story, not just one queer character. End it so we're not left unread. Go to Thailand, American studios, learn how they're doing it. Like, it's smart. I'm here for that. I'm not sad. I can get attached to it and there's nothing wrong with it.
And boy, has Theora gotten attached.
I mean, there's so many things.
Watch Gap and then go watch Blank the Series.
Yeah, go watch Blank the Series. Anyway. So speaking of things to look forward, so that was our advice. What are you looking forward to in the world of queer media?
Chloe, is there anything?
I wish there was more. Like I said, I think I've gotten gun shy about getting invested in something. I will put it out there, manifesting. I am looking forward to season 3 of Our Flag Means Death, where we have not given up. Maybe a movie, some kind of resolution. I really want that. But for an actual answer, I have really just engaged with more media that the cast and crew and creators of the show have done. For instance, Madeline Sammy, who is Archie in season 2 of Our Flag Means Death, is in a really gay show called Deadlock that was just renewed for season 2. So I'm excited for that.
Woo!
So yeah, I am excited for some things.
Show. That's a good show.
Yeah.
How is character not queer in that show?
Which character?
Madeline.
Oh, I don't know. So confession, I haven't watched it yet because as we've been talking about, it's okay. I've been waiting to see if there was going to be continuation and resolution. So I really want to, and I've seen some clips and I'm like, this looks absolutely delightful. And I've been hearing about how unashamedly gay it is. So I'm like, I definitely need to watch this, but I haven't fully watched it yet because
I recommend you do it and then come back and talk to me about it. Because Theora's wife and I are on the same boat with that statement. It makes no sense.
Okay.
Okay, so I just have a list of shows that are coming out that we're aware of. So Theora and
These
I
are
are
the
very-
American shows. These are the American shows.
American shows. Sex Lives of College Girls season 3. I mean, there's a caveat with this because Renee Rapp is leaving the show,
I know.
and we're not okay with
I'm
that.
not happy about that.
Vico Ortiz is in that show too, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Vico, as at the time that we talked to them, did not know if they were in season 3 or not. So no.
We don't know if Vico's coming back in season 3 because Vico wasn't sure. So we'll see.
But would love it. Would love it.
Yeah. The women's
But
center.
because of the changes happening, I don't know if it's going to go
Yeah,
past season
I'm
3.
not
But
happy
we're
about
looking
this.
forward to season 3 because Renee Rapp and Midori
Rapp.
Francis will definitely be in at least a few episodes.
Agreed.
Also looking forward to Yellow Jacket season 3 because that
Yes.
show is a wild time as well. And then basically the best example of fighting for your show is also coming back. Wynonna Earp has a movie coming out at the end of 2024 sometime. We don't actually know a date yet, I think.
On Tubi.
On Tubi. So thank you, Tubi. Tubi! How about Tubi save Our Flag Means Death?
Please.
Right?
Please.
Tubi is really queering it up all over the place. Like, Tubi is trying their best.
I'll take that.
Ghost season 4 is coming. It's a little queer. A little bit. It's a comedy, so I will take what I can get. Grey's Anatomy is coming back, because of course it is. I don't know if I'm excited. I'm like, kind of. I want to see what's going on. But Midori Francis is leaving that show as well. And I'm very sad about it, because then they set her character up with someone else at the last episode of last season. I'm like, how are you going to do that and then have her leave? I don't know. Anyway, I'm pissed off about that.
Grey's Anatomy.
That whole show is like messing up the queer characters right now, and I'm not okay with it. Anyway, Exo Kitty season 2 is also coming out. We covered the first season and people seem to like it, and I am holding out hope that this one is, I mean, it's going to be queer. We have other queer characters.
It's going to be queer. There's multiple queer characters in that show.
Yes. I'm excited for it, though. And then also, when I was researching queer media that was coming out, apparently Agatha Darkhold Diaries is supposed to be queer as well.
Yeah. Do you know who's in it?
Joe Locke.
Yeah, Joe Locke from Heartstopper. Because I'm excited about Heartstopper season 3, which is going to be great. But yeah,
October 3rd.
Joe, in an interview, confirmed that his character is going to be explicitly queer. So finally, something on Disney Plus that's explicitly queer. So that's a win.
Besides Willow, which they forgot they were.
I mean, it's gone, but yeah. And
it's
also,
gone.
It's Marvel too that's explicitly queer. So a lot of wins for that. Other things I'm excited about. So the last season of What We Do in the Shadows, which is another like ensemble that's like explicitly queer and just unabashedly whatever. It's great. If you haven't seen that show, it's so funny. Go watch that show. And then The Last of Us season 2, whenever that finally comes out, like this will be the super queer season based off that video game. So there are things. It's just like they take forever to come out.
Yeah. I'm excited about some of those too. I shouldn't say I'm not excited about anything. But I do have to admit, I feel like Our Flag Means Death has kind of ruined me a little bit in a very good way for queer media, because now my standards are really high for what queer representation can be. And I feel like I'm not satisfied anymore with just like little crumbs of a queer character over here or over there. Like, I want a show that just has queerness imbued in the whole thing.
Listen, I'm with you. Thailand has ruined me because
because
the whole thing is queer. And just
go to Thailand.
Just go to Thailand. I'm so excited for everything coming out of Thailand right now. There's too many things. It's just like, how can we watch all of them? I'm so excited. And maybe listeners at home, by the time you get this, we'll know what Pluto is.
Yes, we're very excited for Pluto, but the bits and pieces that we're getting are very, very confusing, because there's twins, there's mistaken identity, there's a blind person,
and
then there's apparently Satan. And
the
we don't know
devil's
where
in don't know what's going on at the show, but I need to know.
And then also, I'm very excited for the last case. I don't even know if it's getting made, right? Is it?
I don't know. I don't know. We haven't heard anything about it. I
really want it to get made because it's a cross between Grey's Anatomy, CSI, Law and Order, and what was the fourth one?
No, it was those three things.
No, I remember there was like a fourth one. Oh, I Pretty Little Liars.
In there. Which like with a bunch of queer people in it, like that. I want that show so badly. It sounds so messy.
I love messy drama that doesn't have to do with like the relationship. Like I love external weirdness. I want both.
Yeah. I want both because I'm greedy.
I want to have to make another murder board. I had to do this for one of the Thai shows because the relationships were so messy. It's great.
You're never ready for that show. Never ready. Never ready. Just go on the journey. Anyway, so any final words about the cancel your career stuff? Hopefully we don't have to come back and do this again.
But let's be real.
Let's
be real.
Yeah, it's such this sort of weird dichotomy in queer media where on one hand these shows are getting canceled and not given their time and space, but at the same time the queer shows that we are getting, to the extent that we're getting them, feel like they're really changing the landscape of queer media. Like they're not just, they're more well-rounded stories. They're not just about like queer trauma or again this kind of niche experience of queerness. Like there's so much more richness and depth to them when we do get the queer shows. So if we can just get more of them and keep more of them, I mean the possibilities for storytelling and exploring that richness and depth is just so much. There's so much potential there.
Well said. Everything you have said is so well spoken. Chloe, it was so great having you on here today. Like, thank you for sharing your perspective on everything.
Well, thank you for saying that, and thank you for just giving me an opportunity to come and nerd out about the show that changed my life.
That's what we're here for. And everyone listening, like, if you want to come shout about queer media with us, come join our Discord. The link is in the description. We love talking to everybody. And there's so many queer media lovers in there that you'll always have someone to talk to. Also, you can join our Patreon, where we have reaction videos to everything, full length of stuff we're not allowed to put on YouTube because of copyright reasons. It's a great time. And we just love connecting with people and shouting about queer media because there's so much to shout about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bad things, but a lot of good things to shout about, too.
Yeah. So hopefully we will not be back for a third time to discuss this topic. Fingers crossed. Do your merits to Lesbian Jesus. And until next time, hydrate for Lesbian Jesus.
And gayed up all over the place. Bye.
Bye. And with that, we've been Big Gay Energy. If you like this episode, check out all our other episodes right here on YouTube.
Please like, leave a comment below, and subscribe for more amazing super gay content.